So let me tell you, without more ado, a little bit about the two Maddys. Maddie Pearson and Maddie Pickup. They both grew up in Hertford, and in fact, you're good friends, I think. You've known each other for years, which is lovely. Maddie Pearson grew to love the great outdoors because of the lovely environment around here. Maddie's doing a PhD, which is based on your local river, the River Bean. And it's part of a study on the role of climate change in reducing the water in our rivers and our underground water sources. And the aim is to find out what can we do differently so that we have enough water, not just for humans, but for life on Earth. Maddie Pickup studied politics and international relations and then a master's in international development, specializing in climate change adaptation. And here's a coincidence. This Maddie also has a career in water. She's worked across Africa, Geneva, and then back in the UK, helping the UN and then helping WaterAid address the world's water and sanitation crisis. So now Maddy is focused on driving global electricity grids to 100% renewables. Girls, tell us, how can one person make a difference?
Tell you everything, thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone, thanks for coming. We're gonna, as Alison said, we're really good friends. We love talking about this kind of thing. So what we're gonna do is do what we would normally do on a Friday night with a glass of wine in front of all of you. So excuse us while we stumble through a few points and hopefully say something interesting for you to take away. So Maddy, you work in water.
I do.
People often say saving water is an important part of tackling climate change. But if it's getting warmer and wetter, why do we need to save water?
So I think there are a number of really important parts to this question. They speak to some of these sort of wider global issues, then also some much more localised issues, and then really some kind of changing kind of social dynamics and histories about the way we dwell in society. So I'm going to go through those 3 points and finish up by saying what can we do to help with kind of local water issues in our area.
Great, so let's start with the global then.
So I think we talk about climate change in this very kind of global macro perspective where we often hear this narrative of it's getting warmer and wetter, it's getting warmer and wetter. We all hear that. And I think we saw what happened in Canada this summer where it really did get warmer. We've seen what's happened in Western Europe, in Germany, in the Netherlands, and also in London with these huge floods. But I think that we're really seeing this to and fro between extreme drought and then extreme deluge and not much in the middle. And climate change is very different everywhere. It affects different parts of the globe, it affects different parts of the UK differently. And for me, water is one of these issues that really, really shows that kind of difference and why it's so important to understand our own local water situation and how kind of social, population, historical dynamics also interact with these climate change issues.
So what do you mean about changing social and population dynamics? How does that factor into water issues and climate change?
Yes, I think this is something we don't all necessarily think about that much, but obviously we know that climate change is intimately linked to our social lives and the way that we kind of dwell, and it's also, to do with how many of us just quite literally live on the planet now, and all of these have an effect on our water usage, but also on the kind of spatial geography of the hydrologic cycle.
And do you want to explain what that is a little bit?
Yeah, so in a real simplified nutshell, when it rains, it falls to the earth. Where we have nice soil, it penetrates through the soil into what's underneath, which is called groundwater. Now, in lots of places in the UK, groundwater not only feeds a lot of our rivers, like the lovely River Bean, but it's actually where our local water companies take a lot of our water from. Now, changing dynamics in society, increased populations, we're building on more and more of these green spaces. We have a lot more paving, a lot more concrete. So when we have rain, and as I've said, we've seen kind of changing rain patterns from the light drizzle we all associate with the UK to what we've seen this summer, which is real torrential rain. Now, that torrential rain is running off, one, because of climate change, there's much more rain, but also there's much less green space for that rain to be absorbed into, which means those underground groundwater sources are not being replenished in the same way. That means there's less water for us to be taking for ourselves, but also really importantly for our local environments, for the rivers, for the ecosystems that they support. So it's really important that for our local environments, we also think about what we as individuals can do to save water as these changes happen.
And what can we?
What can we do?
As individuals do, and how does it affect us locally in Hertford?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. So in Hertford in particular, all of our water that we have supplied to our homes comes from groundwater and surface water. We don't have any reservoirs that supply our water here. So really what gets absorbed is what we're getting.
And less is being absorbed.
Like I say, we share our water resources with a lot of our local environment. That water is not just for us. It supports the rivers, it supports non-human life, which is also a really important part of keeping a vibrant and thriving ecosystem for everybody. So local things we can do, it's actually a lot easier than you might think to make small changes in your life. So when you're cleaning your teeth, turn the tap off. It doesn't need to be running with you. Have a shorter shower. I know everybody loves a bath. I don't have a bath. I'm jealous of those of you who do. I'm not saying I never have one. When I see I'm staying somewhere with a bath, I'm like, oh my goodness, a bath. But in general, having shorter showers is a great thing to do. Using a washing up bowl, putting the plug in, not just running water while you do that. When you're washing your clothes, they don't need to be washed for hours and hours on end, unless I don't know what you've done with them. Short cycles. Also, my favourite, people don't like to talk about toilets, but if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. If you're like me and you work from home now, no one else is seeing that anyway. You don't need to flush your toilet 100 times a day. But also, our local water company, Affinity, have a lot of water-saving devices that you can ask for free of charge. You can get a Hippo bag, which is something that sits inside your toilet and reduces the amount of water that is used every flush. You can have a smart water meter. And something lovely they have started doing is if you receive paper bills from them, it says on your paper bill now what your average usage is and how that compares to your last bill. So if you implement some of these changes, it's amazing to then be able to go, look, this is what my average usage was a few months ago, and now I'm using a bit less. So you are actually making a difference. You can make that difference, and that's a lovely. Then you see it, and that's a really tangible thing to be really proud of. And then the other thing, the second point I made about kind of building and planning, I think a lot of us will sit and go, but what can I do about that? I can't change Hertford Council's planning department.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. So whenever they do these big building developments, local consultations go out. You can put in a friendly or a strongly worded petition. You can go to these consultations and share your concern. We live in a nice bit of green belt that is increasingly built upon. I'm worried about building on this green space. In the plans for building, is there enough green space being incorporated? So again, you can have a say on things that aren't just your local household, but on these kind of wider parts of our community as well.
Yeah. And if lots of people say something,
exactly. So that's kind of just a nutshell of some of our local water things we can do. But in terms of the wider issue, Maddie, I think a lot of people just don't know where to start. So how can they engage? What are some of the options for people to do more?
Yeah. So I think it's quite easy for people to say, what's going to change if I do something different? It's the big businesses that need to change. It's policy that needs to change. That's where change is really going to happen. But I think the important thing to realise is actually those people in those powerful positions are answerable to us. So businesses aren't going to make profit if they're not doing what the consumer wants, and politicians aren't going to be kept in power if they're not listening to what the people want. So what we need to do is we need to signal to them what we want and make it clear that what we want is something more environmentally friendly in whatever factor of life it might be. So that obviously comes from individual action. So then what are those actions that we can take? Everyone is probably, I would assume if you're in this room, aware of Extinction Rebellion and everything that they've been doing. And that's a really important piece of the puzzle. You can't deny that without them, that Greta Thunberg and people, activists like that, going out there and being very disruptive, we wouldn't be talking about this issue in all the places that it's being talked about. And so it's critical that they've done that and that they've made people listen and aware of the issue. But it's one piece of the puzzle, and not everyone wants to go and glue themselves to a train or lie down in the middle of the road. So there are other ways that you can engage, and those are also really important as well. So I think there's a few bits I want to touch on and areas that you can engage in. The first being policy and trying to influence policies. The second being the actions that you can take yourself, and then the third being kind of just education and learning more about the issue. So I think policy, something you've touched on a little bit already, is writing about things that are coming up in the local area and saying, I don't want this to happen, or I would like to see it happen in this way. And often those kind of things are opened up to public consultation. So there is the opportunity for people to get involved, and they kind of have to listen. They might not completely change the plan, but you might get something in that will improve the situation. You can sign petitions. There's always petitions going around about reducing plastic waste in supermarkets and that kind of thing. You know, when you see them sign them, it doesn't take that much effort from you, but then there's thousands of people that have said to the people making the decisions what they want. You can also, if there's a particular issue that you're really passionate about, you could raise your own petition. Another way is, you know, speaking to the people that represent you. So if you hear about a policy in the news that is going to be tabled at Parliament, and you either don't like it or you really want to support it, write to your local representation, write to your MP and say, I want to see you support this and this is why. And you can encourage other people to do the same as well. And I think, so that's the sort of policy side. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of action that you can actually take yourself, we're going to talk a little bit at the end about like little things that you can change in your life. But I think that also we can recognise that climate change is so like ever present, it's everywhere, influences everything, that in our jobs, no matter what we do, there's some sort of considerations that we could be making to improve our practice. So I don't know what everyone in this room does, so I'm just going to pick a couple of things. I could probably choose some, couldn't I? But I'm not going to do that. So I don't know, you might work in finance, maybe you're advising people on where they should invest their money. What are you advising them on? Is there a greener portfolio that you could put to them? Could you research into some better options? Maybe you have a shop or a business where you're selling things on. What's your supply chain look like? Where are you importing your materials from? Where are your suppliers importing their materials from? What are they made of? Like, there's different ways that everyone in what they already do can make those changes that will have a big impact. But yeah, as I said, I don't know what all of your jobs are. So that brings us to like this third area, which I think is education. So if you can just educate yourself on the issue, obviously you guys are here, so you're probably doing that already. But the more you can read up about it, understand how it fits into your everyday life and what changes you can make, the more impact you can have through that.
Nice. And, you know, you've obviously made your passion and concern for climate change a career. How did you even do that?
So, it may surprise some of you in this room that I wasn't always passionate about climate change. No, I wasn't really that into the issue when I was younger. You know, I knew it was there and we all talked about it like, oh, it's hot, climate change. But it wasn't really like something that factored into my mind or something I wanted to like dedicate my time to until I did my master's. So I did a master's in international development, but my interest in that was more around poverty reduction and kind of helping people to access the most basic of needs, so water, sanitation, hygiene, you know, shelter, food, everything like that. But as part of my master's, I studied climate change, and that's when my eyes were really open to quite how bad the situation was, and I was like, oh God, we really need to do something about this. And I thought I need to be part of that because, you know, we learnt about how the poorest people in the world have done the least to contribute to the problem, but they're being impacted the most. And so me being someone wanting to help those people, it made sense for me to kind of move in this direction because, as we've already said, it affects everything. We're not going to solve problems of poverty and malnutrition if we're not solving climate change, because we might build a farm somewhere and train them how to use the farm. If there's a flood, that farm no longer exists anymore. So climate change is really at the crux of solving all of those issues. So yeah, so that led me to kind of write my thesis on that intersection between poverty reduction and climate change. And that led me into the water, sanitation, hygiene sector. I used to build in considerations of the climate into the project work that we did there. But then recently, you know, COVID, lots of time to reflect. I was like, you know what, we've not got any time left. Like, the most important thing now is just stop this happening and prevent any further damage. So that's what moved me into the area of kind of mitigation and reducing climate change itself.
Nice. And so can you tell me more about what you do and how that drives change?
I can indeed. So I work on a campaign called RE100. Stands for Renewable Electricity 100%. So basically, we get big companies to sign up to commit to using 100% renewable electricity by a certain date. So we like to say 2030, but they set their own targets. So these companies, all part of our campaign, they'll tell us where are the barriers to them being able to achieve that target. They might say, we work in Japan, we have operations there, but we can't buy renewables in this area because this regulation is in our way. So we go to the government and we say, you need to change this regulation. And because we've got 330 at the moment companies as part of our campaign, and their energy consumption combined is bigger than the energy consumption of the UK. So we have like a G7 countries energy consumption that we can go to these governments and we can say, if you don't change this, this is the business that you'll lose. So they have to listen. So we drive change through corporates, they make their commitments and we enable them.
Nice.
But I think what's important to touch upon, kind of bring us back to reality of like what can we do about it, that kind of a campaign wouldn't be possible unless those businesses saw a reason to make that commitment in the first place. And us indicating to business that that's what we need to see from them for us to invest and buy their products, etc., is making them make those commitments. So we've driven that now.
Yeah.
And like in the same way that governments have to listen to RE100, otherwise they lose those corporations' business, the corporations have to listen to us, otherwise they lose ours.
So that's really interesting, and I think that probably brings us all to the dirtiest C word we all know, consumption. So, you know, what is the issue with consumption and what can we all do differently there?
Yeah, so I think we all know that we should just consume less. Like, that we hear reduce, reuse, recycle, there's a reason it's in that order. We need to reduce first, we just don't need to be consuming as much as we are. So I think it's about being mindful of that and just trying to, you know, think more about whether you need something or not. Not saying don't ever buy anything that you don't need. I definitely buy things that I don't need. But you need to, like, if you can be more conscious of it, you'll buy less and you won't just fall for stuff because you think you need it.
Nice.
So yeah, consuming less generally, and then I guess the way that you consume. So it's, you know, clothing is one example, fast fashion, very bad. But I know that you, Maddie, are interested in another way of purchasing clothes.
Yeah, so we are both avid charity shop moochers, have been our entire lives. And I think Maddie said a wonderful thing to me once. She said the most sustainable choice is already in your wardrobe. So first of all, it is already there. If you can use it. If it's broken, repair it. I'm sure we all know someone that can teach us to sew if we don't know how to. And there's nothing better than feeling like you fixed a button on your own trousers. My mum will attest that she did actually teach me to do this, and it's a valuable life skill I take forward with me.
My mum didn't.
But yeah, so, you know, I love buying in charity shops. Those clothes have a story, they have a history, they're part of a really positive chain of recycling. We have lovely charity shops in Hertford that support wonderful charities. So this dress was from Isabel Hospice. It's pure silk. It was £4. It is one of my best buys ever. And, you know, I feel lovely when I wear it.
Great.
Thank you, Maddie. So, you know, you can buy second hand. You can also give your old clothes second hand. Car boot sales, I also love those. There's a great one at Hatfield. Take things with you, buy from other people. Again, it's this cycle of recycling. Or if you want to be more 21st century, use the apps. I also use Depop and Vinted. These are apps you can use to sell clothes with other people. So you're recycling these things. Yeah, online.
And buy.
And buy as well from other people. And, you know, clothes do get to a point, if we love them, we wear them, where repairing is not enough. They've just had it. But that still, don't put them in a black bin. Take them to the clothes material recycling place, then they're broken down and used for something else. So again, I think with clothing, it's just think about those different cycles. There are so many different cycles you could be a part of. They don't all work for everyone, but there will be one within that handful that you can take part in, and they're really good fun. Another thing I share with my mum, our love of car booting. Car boot sales are an entity and a place all their own, so I really encourage you.
You get a bit passionate about
car boot sales. I'm not on commission for them, by the way. Anyway, Maddie, another area people talk about that I haven't really dived into yet, but am interested in, is cosmetics.
Yeah, so I won't talk about this for too long because I think we're running low on time. But there's a lot of replacements that you can do, like with the cosmetics and things that you use in your everyday life. And I mean, there's so much out there, it's kind of hard to navigate. I think it's worth like just trying some things, seeing what works for you. You don't have to replace everything with something plastic free and like, you know, refillable and things like that. But there's lots of options. Shampoo bars and conditioner bars are ones that I'm really into. I found some really good ones that work for me. You can get like this, for example, is refillable hand sanitizer. My mother bought for me for Christmas. I should probably give her a shout out too. And yeah, you know, there's shops where you can go and you buy the product, but you bring the thing back to get it refilled, so you don't have all of these containers to waste. And obviously there's one in Hertford.
Lovely one in Ware High Street now as well.
So yeah, I'd recommend kind of going and looking there and maybe just trying switching some things out, maybe a bamboo toothbrush. You can get these reusable like pads instead of using cotton pads on your face and things like that. But yeah, I'll stop on that now. And yeah, if you want to talk a bit about...
And I think it's the same with cleaning. So back to our brown, flush it down. There are eco toilet brands. you know, it's all made from recycled materials in the first place. There's no plastics. There's companies like that. You can also, you know, use reusable cleaning cloths when you're cleaning your house. They can go in the washing machine, just like other things that are dirty, and hang them on the line and then use them again. Non-plastic dish scrubbers. So again, there's so many options out there, and nobody's expecting anybody to do everything overnight. Nobody needs to do that, but it's about everybody making the small changes that don't ruin their life, but actually make you feel a bit proud of yourself. And that leads us on to one we hear about a lot, which is cooking, Maddie. How can we make a difference in terms of cooking?
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious thing is everyone talks about animal products, meat and dairy and eggs. But, you know, I think the key thing with cooking and with eating is, I think, forget about the labels, do what you can, like, depending on how much you eat already, cut out like 1 or 2 meals a week and just like go from there and see, like, you know, feel it out and see what works for you. Like, I started off I was like, right, 2 nights a week I'll allow myself to eat meat or fish, and then I found I just didn't want to do that anymore, so I just moved to like no meat, and I haven't eaten meat for years. I'll still eat fish if I go out for dinner or if I go to someone's house, because it makes the options better, and you know, you don't have to completely exclude all of that. And, you know, I love cheese, so I haven't excluded that in my life, but I do try and replace all the dairy products like that I use day to day. But yeah, I think it's about finding what works for you, and, you know, buy yourself a nice cookbook that's got some veggie things in it that are easy to make, and just find a few meals that work for you that don't have meat in them, and it's like a good place to start.
Nice. I think the focus on like avoiding the labels is a great idea, because all of us are learning. This is a changing situation that we're all adapting to, and, you know, the consume less, consume better, send that signal to power, but don't compare, be proud and share. Share your wins with other people, ask for advice from other people, great friends you have that are further on this journey than you are. Don't preach to other people, you know, give useful suggestions and praise them for the small changes they're making, and don't compare yourself. Everybody has different lives, everybody has different things that would or wouldn't work for them. Think about you as an individual, what works for you, and then be really, really proud of the step you're taking. So, thank you all for joining us.